The first time Naomi Brooks walked through the wrought iron gates of the Whitfield estate, the sky over Boston was the color of old pewter. The mansion crouched on the hill like a ship at anchor, stone gray, symmetrical, and so quiet that even the birds seemed to hush when she crossed the gravel. She clutched a scuffed suitcase in one hand and a folder of references in the other, the paper edges softened by months of job interviews. White sneakers, pressed thrift store slacks, her mother's silver locket against her collarbone. She dressed the way her mother taught her to face the world, clean, careful, and ready to be underestimated. The housekeeper led her across cool marble and down a corridor that smelled faintly of lemon oil and something floral, expensive, and barely there. Portraits watched her from gold frames, men in rowing blazers, women with pearls, a history painted in brushstrokes and inheritance. A clock ticked somewhere, heavy and authoritative. "Mrs. Whitfield will see you now," the housekeeper murmured, and opened a set of double doors. Vivian Whitfield rose from behind a glass desk in a room that was more museum than office. She was tall, lacquered, immaculate, with a smile that never quite touched her eyes. "Ms. Brooks," she said, like reading a label, "we appreciate punctuality." "Yes, ma'am," Naomi replied. Vivian's handshake was brief and dry. "This position is live-in. Privacy is of utmost importance. We expect discretion." She gestured toward the window. "You'll be responsible for our son, Liam. 2 months old. Nursery's on the second floor." The previous caregiver moved on. Naomi nodded. "I understand." From the doorway, a man entered, open collar, navy blazer, a presence both there and half elsewhere. "Adam Whitfield," he said warmly, extending his hand. His grasp was firm, apology tucked at the corner of his smile as if he were sorry for something he couldn't name. "Good to meet you." Naomi took in his kind eyes and distracted gaze and thought, he's the sort who means well and misses things anyway. They spoke about night feedings and swaddles, sterilizing bottles and infant reflux. Vivian listened for mistakes. Adam asked if Naomi preferred coffee or tea. "Tea," she said, and earned the faintest quirk at the corner of his mouth, as if he hadn't expected her to answer honestly. By sunset, Naomi had the job. Her room was at the end of a quiet hallway single bed, oak dresser, a window that framed the city in the distance like a promise. The nursery was next door, pale walls, white crib, a mobile of small wooden birds that turned whenever the air vent sighed. Monitors blinked with the cool assurance of machines. In the corner, a bassinet overflowed with swaddles soft as breath. Everything gleamed. Everything was provided. Everything felt as staged as a photograph. Liam lay sleeping when she first approached the crib, tiny, milk-scented, with a fist tucked beside his cheek. His lashes wrote faint shadows on his face. He had the Whitfield mouth, delicate and determined, and a cowlick that refused to be tamed. "Hello there," Naomi whispered. "I'm Naomi." The words made something ease in her chest, a small untwisting she hadn't realized she held so tight. She had lost 2 jobs in the past year, one to a budget cut, one to a manager who liked to brush against her in the walk-in pantry, and her mother 6 months before that. Grief had rearranged the furniture of her life. Work, she'd decided, would be the scaffolding that kept the roof from falling in. She was not hired to love this child, but she knew love would happen anyway. In those first weeks, Naomi learned the house as one learns a complicated song, its rhythms, its pauses, the way the air itself seemed trained not to raise its voice. Gardeners appeared at dawn and vanished by noon, lawns shaved to velvet, A florist delivered arrangements that looked like modern sculptures. Vivian drifted through rooms with the brisk serenity of someone who had delegated her humanity. Adam left early and returned late. He smiled at Liam the way a man smiles at a miracle he did not know how to create. Naomi learned Liam's cries, which were small and polite, like a boy apologizing for existing. She charted feedings, burps, diapers, naps. The monitors reported everything in clinical decimals. Yet Naomi listened to the things machines did not hear. The soft change in his breathing, when the room was too cool, the way he turned his head toward music, the pauses between swallows that felt like a cliff edge. On a humid Tuesday, as thunder mumbled beyond the far trees, Naomi drew a bath in the little sink by the window. Steam rose. Liam's tiny body looked impossibly fragile, ribs like commas under his skin. When she lifted him into the towel, she noticed it, the faintest bluish cast at the edges of his lips. Not the purple of cold. She knew that shade from winter mornings and numbed fingers. This was something thinner, as if color were being erased. She held him upright, patted him gently, listened. His breathing was light and quick. A hand pressed to his back felt a tremble, a subtle thrum too close to a shiver. It could be nothing, she told herself. Newborns were mysteries. But the feeling that had kept her mother awake through pediatric wards years ago stirred in Naomi now, an old antenna catching an old frequency. She watched him for an hour. The blue faded. The breathing steadied. When Vivian breezed in with a silk scarf at her throat, Naomi cleared her own. "Mrs. Whitfield? I noticed something this afternoon." Liam's lips looked. She searched for a word that would not sound like alarm. Bluer than usual, just for a minute. His breathing was shallow. Vivian unfastened a bracelet, as if time were a piece of jewelry. The pediatric monitor would have alerted us if anything were amiss. "Babies are peculiar little creatures, Miss Brooks. Don't let yourself be rattled." "I'm not rattled," Naomi said quietly. "I'm observing." "I thought you should know, duly noted," Vivian murmured, which is what the wealthy say when they prefer not to think. That night, Naomi made a small grid in the notebook she kept in her dresser. Date, time, symptom, circumstance. Mother had taught her this too when you are not believed. Keep a record you can hold like a stone. The next day, there was sweat along Liam's hairline when the room was cool. The day after, he tired quickly while nursing. Twice he made a sound like a sigh, and then paused before taking the next breath, a pause that rang too long inside Naomi's bones. Each instance went into the notebook with the steadiness of rainfall. Each time she mentioned it to Vivian, she received the same thin smile. "New nannies always worry," Vivian said. "You'll find your equilibrium." Adam was kinder. "I'll ask the doctor to squeeze us in next week," he told Naomi on a Friday evening, one shoe off, tie loosened, just for peace of mind. But the appointment, like so much in their lives, became a thing to be moved. A dinner with clients materialized. A charity gala was suddenly imperative. Naomi waited. She watched for blue. On a Sunday afternoon too warm for May, the Whitfields hosted a garden party for board members and donors and people who believed their last names were currencies. Linen murmured over tables. Champagne laughed in flutes. A string quartet in the corner stitched Vivaldi through the air like seams. Naomi moved between the nursery and the edge of the patio, a quiet figure in a pale dress near a French door, invisible by design. She returned to the nursery for a routine diaper change and felt the hair along her arms lift. Liam's skin was cool despite the heat. Fine sweat beaded his forehead. When she lifted him, his small body seemed both heavy and too light, a distressing paradox. The blue had crept back to his lips and spread to his tongue like a whisper. His breathing was shallow. Quick, count it. Naomi, count, and the numbers sprinted away from her. Hey, little man, she breathed, and her calm voice was a raft she climbed onto because if she didn't, she would drown. Look at me, okay? Look at me. She folded him into the towel, gathered him to her chest, and descended the stairs with the particular speed of someone trying to be both fast and careful. The quartet swelled. The crowd glittered. Naomi stepped into the sun and felt its heat like an insult. Mrs. Whitfield? Her voice landed and sank. She raised it. Mrs. Whitfield. Conversations paused in a ripple. Vivian turned, crystal glass limning the light. Yes? Please, Liam's color is... He's breathing, please. Naomi held the baby forward, both palms under that small ribcage as if offering up a world. Vivian peered over the rim of her glass, then over the shoulders of her friends. Ms. Brooks, she said, with a laugh that belonged on a smaller stage, our new caregiver is still finding her sea legs. It's quite something. The dramatics of first-time staff. We were all so protective with our first children, weren't we? Polite laughter lubricated the beautiful afternoon. Naomi felt heat rise to her face, shame, rage, the wild animal of fear. Liam made a sound then, a breath and a pause and a breath that was not enough. Please, Naomi said, and humiliation sharpened her voice into a blade. Please. But wealth prefers to be undisturbed. The party resumed its irresponsible joy. Naomi turned away, the blue a tide she could see advancing. She fled back up the stairs to the privacy of her panic and laid Liam in his crib, counting seconds the way a believer counts rosary beads. She thought of the monitors and hated them for their false calm. She thought of her mother in hospital waiting rooms saying, please, please, listen, and doctors who mistook weariness for hysteria. She thought of how jobs and money can be replaced and babies cannot. She lifted her phone. Her thumb hovered over 911. If they fire me, if he dies. The words were not equal. Only one was a crime. She sat through the night in a chair by the crib, recording every fragile rise of Liam's chest. Dawn washed the room in a bleached light. Her head ached like a held breath. At breakfast, Vivian swept in with an unreadable expression and announced, without looking at Naomi, "We'll go to the pediatrician today." Routine check. No need to alarm anyone. Thank you, Naomi said, and meant it far more than Vivian deserved. The clinic resembled a spa where one might purchase both a smoothie and a second chance. On the wall hung photographs of infants like small saints framed by frames that cost more than Naomi's rusted car. Vivian scrolled her phone while Naomi paced in infinitesimal steps, rocking the carrier with her foot. When the doctor entered, a careful man with kind hands and the defeated posture of someone who fights complacency for a living. Vivian took control of the narrative the way a conductor takes a baton. He eats, he sleeps, he fusses, she said crisply. All within range, I'm told. Our nanny is conscientious. She mentioned some blue tinge after baths. It wasn't only after baths, Naomi said quietly. He tires easily. He sweats when it's cool. His lips are sometimes blue, especially around the edges. He pauses while feeding. She offered her notebook. The doctor took it. He read without smiling. "Let's take a look," he said, and lifted Liam with practiced gentleness. He listened. He watched the chest rise and fall. He checked oxygen saturation. The room hushed around the numbers. "I'd like to run a few tests," he said. "An echocardiogram, some blood work." Vivian's expression remained polite but cooling. "Is that necessary?" "It is cautious," the doctor replied. "And caution is kindness in infants." On the drive home, Vivian was silent. The tests were scheduled for the following week. Naomi exhaled for the first time in days. The relief lasted until dusk. She'd just bathed Liam, wrapped him in a hooded towel with tiny bare ears, and was humming the blues her mother loved when his body went loose in her arms. It was not sleep. It was not the ordinary bonelessness of babies. His mouth parted. The blue deepened into an ocean. His breathing faltered, a stutter, a near stop, a thin, high cry like torn silk. Naomi's own body remembered the posture of prayer. She stepped into the hall. "Mrs. Whitfield!" Her voice cracked and carried. "Please!" Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs in linen and anger. "What is it now?" "He needs a hospital," Naomi said. "Now." "Please look at him," Vivian descended, each step a verdict. She glanced at Liam and then at Naomi, heat gathering across her face. "You are overstepping. You embarrassed me yesterday. You are creating scenes. I'm trying to save your son. You're fired." Silence gathered like storm clouds in a room that had nothing to say. Naomi stared at her a heartbeat longer. Then she turned and ran. She ran through corridors, down the stairs, past the portraits that did not help, out into the dusk where air had texture and life. She had no car at arm's reach and no permission, but she had a phone and a voice she refused to lower. 911, she said when the operator answered. "Infant in respiratory distress, 2 months old. Lips cyanotic, breathing shallow. We're at 712 Beacon Hill Road, Whitfield residence. My name is Naomi Brooks. I'm the caregiver. Help is on the way," the operator said, efficient mercy in a headset voice. "Stay with me. Keep the baby upright against your chest. Sing or speak softly. We're coming." Naomi pressed Liam to her heart and sang the song her mother used to sing on nights the machines in their tiny apartment beeped like tired birds. "You are my sunshine," she hummed, rocking, rocking, the porch light making a halo on the gravel. "My only sunshine." The paramedics arrived in a flash of color that made the world sudden and possible. A medic took one look, said cyanotic, and Naomi felt the word move through her like a bell. They placed a tiny mask over Liam's face. Naomi climbed into the ambulance without asking permission from a life that had never once offered it. The emergency department's lights were loud enough to make tears. Its smell the strangely clean scent of fear. They wheeled Liam away. Naomi stood by a machine whose purpose was to be the wall she leaned on as her legs shook. Her phone buzzed with numbers she did not answer. A physician in navy scrubs approached, brisk with kind eyes. "Miss Brooks? I'm Dr. Imran. The baby is stable, but we need to talk." She rose like someone surfacing. "Is he breathing on his own now?" "Yes," he said. "His oxygen saturation was low when you arrived. Based on presentation, blue lips, sweating, feeding difficulty, we're concerned about a congenital heart defect. Possibly hypoplastic left heart syndrome or a related condition. We'll know more after imaging." "Is that dangerous?" The word felt too small. "It can be critical. It also can be managed," with prompt surgical intervention. He held her gaze a moment. If you hadn't brought him in when you did, Ms. Brooks, he might not have made it through the night. The words unstitched her. She sat because she had to. The chair accepted her sob the way an ocean accepts a pebble. Dr. Imran placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, then moved away to save other lives. When Adam arrived, he looked like a man who had lost and found his son within the same 5 minutes. He crossed the room in 3 strides. Is he? He could not complete the sentence, and Naomi understood that sometimes love is only fragments. He's stable, Naomi whispered. They think his heart there's a defect. They're running tests. Adam pressed his hands to his face. His voice came from behind them. Vivian said you were. He stopped, and all the apologizing he owed lived in the space he could not fill. He lowered his hands. You saved him, he said hoarsely. I wasn't here to see it. But you did. I did what anyone would do, Naomi said. Not everyone, he replied. Vivian arrived hours later, composed into a precision that cracked only at the edges. She walked past Naomi with the cool efficiency of someone crossing a stranger's shadow and went straight to the attending. 10 minutes later she returned, eyes too bright. You made us look weak, she said softly. And Naomi understood that some people would rather be strong than be saved. Naomi did not answer. She didn't have to. Liam was alive. They sent him to the pediatric cardiac unit under a wash of monitors and hope. Naomi took the bus back to the estate at dawn, the city still half dreaming outside the fogged window. In her room, she sat on the bed in her clothes and traced a thumb over the locket, its silver warm from her skin. Relief had a cost. It took everything and gave shaking hands in return. 2 days later, her phone lit with a number she recognized. Adam asked to meet. Naomi almost said no. Pride and sorrow are twins. Each refused to be seen. But there was a steadiness in Adam's voice that made room. They met at a corner coffee shop where the air smelled like cinnamon and tired students. Adam looked different out of his blazer, smaller, real, the version of a man that exists when nobody's awarding him anything. Liam's stronger, he said before he sat. They're scheduling surgery. He's making faces I never knew he had. Naomi closed her eyes and could see it, the little twitch his mouth made before a smile, the way his left hand opened like a star. She opened them again and found Adam watching her as if he felt the same small mercy slip by. He placed an envelope on the table. I know, Vivian. I know. This is severance more than we agreed, but I didn't ask you here for money. He slid a sheet of paper beside the envelope, his handwriting uneven. You weren't just hired help. You were sight when we were blind. I want to put that in writing, too. Thank you, Naomi said, blood rushing her ears. The words were plain and enormous. And Adam's fingers worried the edge of his cup. I spoke with the hospital. With Dr. Imran. With a nursing program coordinator we know. If you'd consider it, we'd like to sponsor your return to school. Finish your nursing degree. Full ride. No strings. Except maybe the hope you'll say yes. The room tilted a degree. Naomi reached for the table edge. I didn't finish. I left 2 semesters short. My mother, she got sick. We know, Adam said quietly. I'm sorry we didn't know sooner. No one had ever said that kind of sorry to her. Not for what she had done, but for what she had carried alone. Her answer did not come then. She needed to hold the possibility like a stone for a while, feel its weight, see if it was something she could keep. In the days that followed, Naomi didn't return to the mansion. She returned to the hospital. Liam's room became a small country with flexible borders. Fluorescent mornings opened into long afternoons of monitors and murmurs. Nurses in rubber-soled shoes, moving like practiced dancers. Naomi learned the names of machines the way children learn the names of stars. She learned the protocols for washing in and out, the particular dignity of a baby's body tethered but whole. A nurse with soft eyes and a Boston accent that made sentences sound warmer handed her a clipboard. "You've been in here more than half our staff. Want to keep his daily log?" Parents appreciate a second set of eyes. I'm not his mother," Naomi said. "You're his person," the nurse replied, and walked away, leaving a kindness behind her like a footprint. Naomi wrote. She wrote when Liam ate and how well, when he slept and how deeply, what calmed him, low humming, and what did not, sudden laughter, the squeak of certain shoes. She wrote the small blue warnings when they came, and how quickly they faded under oxygen's generous hand. She wrote, but she also spoke, and when she spoke now, people listened. Doctors asked what she had noticed. Nurses nodded when she pointed to patterns. Respect, she discovered, is not a sound, but an absence, the quiet where disbelief used to be. When Vivian came to the unit, she came first in heels and perfume and posture. The second week, she came in flats. The third, she came with a question. "Could you show me how to read that?" She meant the pulse oximeter. Naomi showed her, steady as a teacher, and did not lace the moment with triumph. There are victories that don't look good on anyone's face. One afternoon, Vivian appeared with a folder of papers worn at the corners. "I went through the files," she said, not quite meeting Naomi's eyes. "The notes. Your notes. The clinic's recommendations. I've been trying to find where I was right." She exhaled something close to a laugh. "I couldn't." Naomi could have said many things. Instead, "Thank you for telling me." Vivian nodded. "If you choose to stay with us." Her voice dipped at the edge of that sentence, as if she'd stepped too close to the truth. "If you choose to stay with Liam, I'd like you to do it not as staff, but as, I don't know the word. Family seems presumptuous, but something like that." She handed Naomi a small boxhouse keys, access cards, a gate transponder that lifted a barrier on contact. "If you choose." No pressure, Naomi held the weight of metal and circumstance in her palm. "I need time," she said simply. Surgery arrived like a date no one wanted, and everyone was grateful to see. The pediatric cardiac team moved Liam down sterile hallways, while Adam and Vivian walked on either side like new disciples who didn't know the words. Naomi sat in the waiting room with her hands around her locket, the chain cutting a small crescent into her skin. The hours a series of doorways she had to walk through without knowing what waited. When the surgeon returned, he looked like a man who had wrestled an angel and kept its blessing. "He did well," he said. "It was long." "He's a fighter." The three of them broke in different ways. Adam with a laugh that was also a sob. Vivian with a hand to her mouth like a prayer she didn't know she knew. Naomi with a sudden absence of tension so profound she had to sit to keep from falling through it. Recovery was a long road paved with ordinary miracles. The first bottle after the tube came out. The first unassisted breath. The first drowsy, satisfied sigh, like a little sail filling with wind. Naomi learned dressing changes and medicine schedules, gentle physical therapy for muscles slowed by lying still. She learned how to read Liam's eyes for discomfort, when to call for help, how long to wait before worry turned into action. Her hands were deft and sure. Her voice could quiet the room. Word began to seep beyond hospital walls, carried by a nurse's cousin's friend and a reporter with a beat for human things. The caregiver who saved the air. A headline read the way headlines do, reducing and expanding in the same breath. Naomi didn't consent to the telling, not exactly, but she didn't run from it either. Her inbox filled with messages from mothers and nurses and aunties and women who were no one's anything, and everyone's answer. Thank you for speaking up. I was told I was dramatic. My daughter's alive because I insisted. Because I insisted. Because I insisted. One evening, Adam laid a printout of an article on the Whitfield living room table. The estate felt different now, less like a museum, more like walls learning to be home. The article was in the Boston paper. Photo of Naomi stepping into an ambulance blurred into gray. Someone leaked it, Adam said. Not me. Not Vivian. Maybe a nurse. I'm not upset. Neither am I, Naomi said softly. Not anymore. A week later, a university email arrived with the subject line, Scholarship Offer. She read it 3 times to be sure words still meant what they meant. Full tuition for completion of a nursing degree with a focus on pediatric care. A stipend. A schedule that respected her work with Liam. She cried until the locket warmed again. A year to the week after she had crossed the Whitfield threshold, Naomi crossed another in a lecture hall where her name appeared on a syllabus and students opened laptops like book covers. She was not professor yet, not in title, but invited to guest lecture about pediatric assessment in infants who couldn't speak for themselves. She began, Listening is not passive. It is an intervention, the room wrote it down. At home, because by then the estate had allowed her a suite with a view of the birch trees and a chair that fit her body, she found a letter under her door. Vivian's handwriting was precise. If you ever decide to make this your permanent address, it read, we'd be honored. If you ever decide to make the whole world your address, we'll be honored by that too. The words were not an apology. They were a tribute. Months layered into seasons. Liam laughed, then sat, then toddled. A small stethoscope always near, a hand reaching first for Naomi when fear visited. Naomi, he called her, and the mispronunciation stitched itself to her as a second name. Naomi balanced clinical shifts with classes, papers with bedtime stories. She mentored younger women of color who had learned the same lessons she had, sometimes the hard way. That a raised voice and a raised standard are not the same thing, and sometimes you need both. One spring, an invitation arrived from a conference called Women of Courage. Keynote, it said, as if the word belonged to her. Naomi stood at a podium in a white dress and told a room full of women, they called me emotional. They called me insubordinate. They called me the help. But a title doesn't change the truth your body knows. Speak anyway. The applause wasn't loud so much as long, a standing wave easing against the shore of the stage. In a quieter moment, after the conference and the interviews, and the careful what you say to cameras, Adam and Vivian asked Naomi into the study. The room smelled like wood and old maps. They stood too straight, like people practicing sincerity in a mirror. We've been thinking, Adam said. Vivian swallowed. The kind of steel she wore now was different, tempered by heat, not polished by distance. We'd like to name you in our guardianship papers. If anything ever happened to us. You're already family. We want the law to agree." The offer held the weight of a life. Naomi felt its gravity and felt, too, the tug of something wider on her sleeve. She looked at Liam's framed drawing circles containing circles, the universe as drawn by a boy with a repaired heart. She looked out the window at the birches that had grown a little taller in the year she'd watched them. When she spoke, her voice was both tender and unyielding. "I love him," she said. "I always will. But I think my work is bigger than these walls. There are other mothers who won't be believed. Other babies whose lips will be blue in rooms less beautiful than this. If I stay here forever, I'll be safe and he'll be safe. If I go, I might make other rooms safer too." Vivian closed her eyes, and when she opened them, there was pride in the place where anger used to live. "Then go," she said. "And if you ever need to come back, this door will remember you." Naomi moved into a small apartment in Roxbury, with sun that hit the kitchen exactly where a plant wanted to live. She taught part-time while finishing her degree and working per diem in pediatrics. She created a program that paired nursing students with community advocates to navigate pediatric visits for families likely to be dismissed. She published a piece in a medical journal about caregiver observation as clinical data. Emails multiplied. So did invitations. So did lives changed in quiet, measurable ways, oxygen read more carefully, feedings adjusted, referrals made sooner, surgeries done before emergencies. She still returned to the estate many afternoons. She still made his favorite dish-mashed sweet potatoes with a pinch of cinnamon and watched him barter bites for stories. She still pressed her ear to his chest when he'd let her. The scar, a smooth river her finger traced like a map back to the night she chose the difficult right over the easy wrong. When she said goodnight, he'd grab the chain of her locket with sticky fingers and say, "Tell me again." And she would. Because stories are how we live twice. Years threaded themselves like beads. Liam at 5 with front teeth missing. Liam at 7 with a toy plane in a Connecticut field. The sky so blue, it felt like the world had forgiven itself. "Mom," he yelled to Vivian, "why don't I remember being a baby?" Vivian smiled, and the smile contained an answer and a thanks and a lesson. "Because you were busy fighting," she said. "And you had help." At the university across town, Naomi, now Professor Brooks, the title surprising her less each day, dismissed class with a reminder. Write down what your patient's people tell you. It is data. It is also love. A student hovered after everyone left, backpack strap twisted in her hand. "Professor," she asked, voice barely there, "is it true that you once saved a baby no one believed was sick?" Naomi smiled, feeling the memory land, then soften. "It's true that I refused to be quiet," she said, "and that saved him. Sometimes that's the order." That night, grading papers with the window cracked to let the spring in, her phone chimed. A message from Adam. A photo of Liam in a child-sized lab coat, stethoscope reversed around his neck, grin big enough to knock a person over. The caption said, "He says he wants to be like you." Naomi held the phone to her chest and whispered, "He already is." And the night felt like a blessing someone had left on her stoop with her name on it. Once, when Naomi was still brand new to grief, her mother told her that legacy was the echo of courage you leave behind you. Naomi had not understood then. She did now. Legacy was in the nursing student who interrupted a pediatrician to say, her lips were blue while feeding. It was in the chart note that read, "Caregiver observed," and the attending who circled the phrase and wrote, "Pay attention." It was in the community clinic where a sign on the wall said, "Your observations are welcome here," in 4 languages, including the soft language of a nod. Legacy was in Vivian, who began to show up at hospitals and fund community health initiatives with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She did not put her name on buildings. She put it in grants that trained nurses from neighborhoods like the one Naomi grew up in. She called Naomi to ask which programs mattered. She listened to the answer. Legacy was in Adam, who left the office earlier and learned to make pancakes on Sunday mornings that came out lopsided and perfect. It was in the way he looked at his son with the kind of attention that turned into memory. Legacy was in Liam, whose scar was a line of history, and who wore his little lab coat to bed and once whispered to Naomi, "When I grow up, I'm going to listen to the quiet things." She kissed his forehead and said, "Then you'll save more people than you can count." When the Women of Courage conference invited Naomi back years later not to tell the old story, but to talk about what had been built because of it, she stood at the podium and spoke about systems and equity and the delicate ferocity of listening. She told them about the notebooks caregivers keep, how they are acts of both remembrance and rebellion. She told them about the day a blue lip turned into a siren, and a siren turned into a life, and how ordinary bravery had been the bridge from one to the other. Near the close, she said, "There will be days when someone will laugh at your fear because it inconveniences their comfort. There will be days when your care will be mistaken for insubordination. On those days, I want you to remember, you are not here to make anyone comfortable. You are here to keep people alive." They rose to their feet. But as always after applause, she thought of a quiet room with a crib, of a night when she sat counting breaths while a world looked away, and of the ambulance lights that turned a driveway into a cathedral. She thought of her mother, who had once held a sick baby Naomi herself and said to nurses and doctors in crowded ERs, "Please listen," until someone did. She thought of how every brave act repeats itself through time like a song you picked up from someone humming in the next apartment over. A melody you will hum to someone else, who will hum it to someone else, who will hum it to someone whose lips are blue until they are pink again. Later that evening, Naomi walked home through a city that had learned her name. Her apartment smelled like basil and paper, and a life she had made and kept. On the kitchen table lay a letter with no return address. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. She opened it with a fingernail, that small ritual always a little holy. If Liam ever asks why he had 2 mothers, I'll tell him. One gave him life, the other gave him a future. Fee. Naomi folded the letter along its natural creases and pressed it under the cool weight of a bowl. Outside, the streetlight clicked on, a star lowered for neighborhood use. She touched her locket and felt again its curve, the place where grief and hope had worn it smooth. She made tea. She opened her laptop to lesson plans and policy drafts and emails from students who would be better than she was, which is the point. She looked at the plant on the windowsill that turned its leaves toward the light without apology. She thought of a boy asleep across town, his breath a rhythm in a room that no longer pretended to be museum. She thought of the first breath he took after the tube came out, that tiny, courageous sound, and how it had remade her. The kettle hissed. She poured. She sat. Somewhere she could imagine it. The thin thread of a lullaby moving through the walls of the world, followed by another and another, until the stitch held. And if, in some house tonight, a caregiver counted a baby's breaths and paused at the long sigh between them, Naomi wanted that person to feel it, the echo of courage, the permission to disturb, The knowledge that doing the right thing might cost them a job and still be the absolute bargain of a lifetime. She wanted them to pick up a phone and dial and sing while sirens drew near. It was not fate that had saved Liam Whitfield's life. It was not wealth. It was not even medicine, though medicine had done the beautiful work only medicine can do. It was a woman who refused to stay in her place because the child in her arms was running out of air. It was the decision to risk humiliation for the sake of breath. It was a locket warm against a sternum, a song that steadied hands, a notebook that turned observation into evidence, a courage that turned into legacy. Naomi finished her tea and set the mug down with the small decisive sound of a life choosing itself again. On her desk were two piles, one of essays to grade, the other of grant applications for the program that now matched hundreds of advocates with families each year. She reached for the grants. She worked until the city softened and the night gathered around her, gentle as sleep. When she finally turned off the lamp, she crossed her small living room to the window and looked toward the side of the city where birches grew against old stone, imagining a boy's breath in the dark. She stood there long enough to see the streetlight click off, the sky graying with morning. A new day was coming, the kind that asks nothing and then everything. Naomi smiled into it, her reflection dim in the glass, and whispered because some words are truer when you speak them softly, "I'm listening." In the end, Naomi's story is not just about one child, one mansion, or one courageous nanny. It is about the power of listening when everyone else chooses silence. She reminds us that the most important titles in life are not millionaire or doctor, but someone who cared enough to act. Naomi teaches us that dignity is not given by wealth or position. It is earned when we stand for the truth, even when it costs us everything. Life will always place us at crossroads. Remain silent and safe, or speak up and risk being misunderstood. Naomi shows us that when we choose courage, we may save not only one life, but countless others who will follow. Her voice was small, but it echoed into eternity because she dared to raise it. If her journey touched you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever faced a moment when speaking up made all the difference? We'd love to hear your story. And if you believe in keeping alive the spirit of courage, compassion, and unseen heroes, please subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll keep telling the stories that remind us all. One voice, one act of love can change the world.